The bucket was already tipping when the ballroom stopped breathing. Black paint sheeted through the chandelier light, like ink poured through gold, and Amara Johnson did not move. She did not lift her hands. She did not scream. She simply closed her eyes the way a person closes them against wind and let the paint find her hair, her shoulders, her white cotton collar, the small silver locket that had been her mother's last gift. 1,000 phones rose. 1,000 mouths opened. Somewhere in the second tier, a woman laughed the small, bright laugh of a person who had never been humiliated in her life. And at the far end of the hall, at the head of a long ivory table set for 400 guests, Kang Min-jun set down his glass of untouched champagne with such quiet precision that the sound of crystal on marble carried farther than the laughter did. "Look at yourself," Han Seo-yeon said. Her voice was pitched for the cameras, warm as poured honey. "A maid pretending to become a queen." Amara did not answer. She reached, slowly, with a hand still steady, and wiped one stroke of paint from her right eye. Then she lifted her chin and looked, not at the fiancé who had emptied the bucket, but at the man at the head of the table. She looked at him the way one looks at a stranger, one has already met somewhere else, in some quieter room, on some rainier night. Her lips did not move, but something in her face said, plainly without cruelty, "I know exactly who you are. Do you know who I am yet?" Kang Min-jun rose. If a single moment can rewrite an entire lifetime of power, this was that moment. So stay close, because what he did next did not just end an engagement. It rearranged the map of half a continent. Hit that like button and subscribe, because the woman covered in paint at the center of that ballroom was about to become the one thing no one in the room had prepared for. He walked. He did not hurry. He crossed the length of the ivory table with his hands in his pockets, and every guest he passed lowered their eyes. He was 34 years old, 6 feet 2 inches, dressed in a tuxedo hand-stitched in Milan by a tailor who had refused to serve 2 presidents but had cut for the Kang family for 30 years. He was, according to 3 newspapers on 3 continents that morning, the most dangerous private citizen in Asia. He stopped 1 meter from Amara. He looked at the paint pooling around her shoes. He looked at Han Seo-yeon. He looked back at Amara. He did not offer her a napkin. He did not offer her his hand. He removed his tuxedo jacket slowly, the way a man removes something valuable he is about to give away without a second thought, and he settled it around her paint-slick shoulders as though placing a robe on a saint. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he said. He said it to Han Seo-yeon. He said it without turning his head. The ballroom did not gasp. Rooms of this altitude did not gasp. They only lowered their volume by one perceptible tone, the way forests lower their volume when a predator moves through them. Han Seo-yeon smiled. Her smile flickered. It was, Kang Min-jun noticed with the same precision with which he tracked stock movements, exactly a half second too slow. He noticed. Amara, standing beside him, noticed that he noticed. And in the small triangular geometry of that noticing, the balance of the room quietly, invisibly changed. "Min-jun-si," Han Seo-yeon said, her voice modulated for the cameras. "You are embarrassing yourself over a servant." "I am ending an engagement," he said. "There is a difference. Learn it." He turned to Amara. He did not touch her. He inclined his head, the smallest bow, a bow he had not given anyone in a decade. "You will not be answering questions tonight, Miss Johnson. You will be my guest for the remainder of this evening. There is a car waiting, a room upstairs, fresh clothes, a doctor if you would like one. You are free to refuse all of it, but you are not required to be looked at any longer." She looked up at him. Paint slid down her cheek and caught in the corner of her mouth. She wiped it with the back of her wrist. "Thank you, Kang-si," she said. Her Korean was low, careful, unaccented. "But I would prefer to walk out the way I walked in, through the front doors, on my own 2 feet. He studied her for exactly 1 second. "Then that is what we will do." She turned. She walked. She did not hurry. She walked the length of the ivory table exactly as he had walked it, past 400 faces, past the flashing phones, past the laughing woman who had suddenly stopped laughing, past the trailing tail of black paint that marked her path across the marble like the wake of a small, deliberate ship. He walked 1 full step behind her. He did not speak. He did not touch her. He only walked. And the ballroom, which had been arranged for a triumph, watched a coronation instead. At the door, the concierge, a thin man named Jongbek Ho, who had served the Grand Seoul Imperial for 29 years, inclined his head with a formality he had never before shown a member of his own staff. She met his eyes. She inclined her head in return. Behind her, without raising his voice, Kang Min-jun spoke to no one in particular. "Bring me every recording, every phone, every camera in that room by midnight." 9 hours before that ballroom, Amara had been on the 17th floor of the same hotel, on her knees with a soft brush, cleaning grout between white tiles in a bathroom the size of her entire apartment. She was 28 years old, 5'7", with the kind of curves South African aunties still called stately. Her hair was braided into a low bun she covered with a plain gray scarf during shifts. Her wrists were slender but strong from 6 months of double shifts. She had come to Korea 2 years ago with a business management degree from Cape Town and her mother's silver locket, and Korea had shown her patiently and daily that a degree from Cape Town meant less in a Seoul job interview than 3 inches of extra height and a Korean surname. She had made peace with it. She had made peace by refusing to be small. At 3 in the afternoon, she had let a homeless boy at the service entrance eat her lunch. At 4, she had covered a shift for a Filipina co-worker whose son was in the hospital. At 5, she had stopped an assistant manager from firing a new girl who had, in her first week, mistakenly polished a marble surface with lemon oil. At 6, when the assignment sheet had been passed around and someone had needed to serve drinks at the Kang family's engagement gala. Because 2 servers had called in sick, Amara had taken the tray without complaint. She had not known whose engagement it was. She had not asked. In her 2 years at the hotel, she had learned that the names of the powerful rarely helped her. Only their tips did. She had noticed the man at the head of the table almost immediately. He had noticed her first. She had recognized him, of course, not from newspapers, from a rainy Tuesday 6 weeks earlier. 6 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday at 11:47 p.m., she had opened the door of the presidential suite on the 40th floor to deliver a change of linens ordered for a guest who had not answered any of the earlier calls. She had knocked 3 times. She had entered with the passkey. She had found a man face down on the pale carpet in a suit that had been white at the collar in the morning and was black at the shoulder by the time she reached him. She had not screamed. She had not called for help. She had done, in exactly that order, 3 things her father, a man she had lost when she was 19, had once made her memorize on a Sunday afternoon on a farm outside Stellenbosch. She had turned him onto his back. She had checked the wound. She had pressed the folded linens against his shoulder with the full weight of her forearms until the bleeding slowed enough for her to think. She had not called the front desk because a man in a $5,000 suit who bled into a presidential suite on a Tuesday night in Seoul was not a man who wanted a police report. She had called nobody. She had cleaned him herself with the small first aid kit in the housekeeping cart, using techniques she had learned in a farm workers' clinic outside Cape Town when she was 15. She had stitched a 2-inch cut over his shoulder blade with a curved needle from her own sewing kit and dental floss soaked in the suite's imported vodka. She had held an ice pack against his forehead for the rest of the night because his temperature had begun to climb. He had woken, briefly, at 4 in the morning. He had looked at her. He had asked her, in a voice thinned by pain, what her name was. "Amara," she had said. "Amara what?" "Amara Johnson." "Amara Johnson," he had repeated. He had said it the way a man says a name he intends to remember. "Why did you not call the police?" She had considered the question. "Because you did not ask me to," she had said. He had smiled. It was the smallest movement of his mouth. It had disappeared almost as fast as it had arrived. He had closed his eyes. She had sat on the small brocade chair beside the bed, and she had held the ice pack against his forehead until sunrise. Then she had risen, cleaned the suite of every trace of blood, replaced the linens, filed no report, and gone downstairs to begin her 7 a.m. shift on the second floor. She had not spoken to him since. He had, without her knowledge, spoken about her every week for 6 weeks. At the gala, when she carried her tray past the ivory table, she felt his eyes on her once and did not turn. When she felt them a second time, she permitted herself a single glance. It was the glance that Han Seo-yeon, seated 2 chairs away, had seen. It was the glance that had put a bucket of black paint into Han Seo-yeon's very manicured hands. Kang Min-jun did not take Amara to the presidential suite that night. He took her to a private wing on the 42nd floor she had not known existed. A woman in her 50s, a woman named Cho Yoon-ja, who introduced herself as the household manager and who bowed 9 degrees, an unheard-of depth for a stranger, met them at the door with 3 warm towels, a change of clothes, and a physician who spoke 4 languages. Amara refused the physician. She accepted a shower. She accepted a plain black sweater and a pair of soft trousers laid across the bed, as though they had been sitting there for her since the morning. She did not, when she looked at the label inside the collar, react to the fact that the label carried a designer's mark and her size, stitched by hand. She only folded her ruined uniform and set it in a paper bag by the door because she intended to wash it and return it to hotel laundry in the morning. When she stepped back into the sitting room, Kang Min-jun was seated at a low table. He had removed his cufflinks. He had rolled his sleeves. In front of him lay a small folder. "Sit," he said quietly. She sat. "I owe you an apology, Miss Johnson." "For which part?" "For all of it, but specifically for tonight." She looked at him. She waited. "I have been having you followed," he said. It was not a confession. It was a statement of fact, delivered in the same voice with which a lawyer might read a clause. "Not by many, by one man. His name is Yu Sang-il. He is my head of internal security. His instructions were to make sure you were safe and to make sure no one in my organization or my fiancé's family became aware of your existence. 6 weeks ago, he failed at the second instruction, though not through his own error. You have a coworker at this hotel who is on Han Seo-yeon's private payroll. Her name is Kim Ha-rin. I would like you to know this because you would rather know it than not." Amara absorbed the information without moving. "You have been watching me," she said. "I have been watching over you. It is a small difference. It matters." "Why?" He did not answer immediately. He opened the folder in front of him. He turned it around so she could read it. It contained a photograph she had not seen since she was 17. A photograph of her father, Solomon Johnson, standing in the mouth of a mine shaft in the Northern Cape with a hard hat under his arm and a slight smile on his face. Her fingers went still on the arm of the chair. "Where did you get this?" "From my father's file, which was returned to me 11 months ago along with a great deal else by an old man who used to work for both of them." She looked up. "Both of them." "Yes, Miss Johnson, I would like to tell you a story." "Not tonight. Tonight I would like you to sleep. But tomorrow, if you will let me, I would like to tell you the story of the 17 years my father and yours spent working together in secret. And I would like to tell you what your father was actually doing in that mine shaft. And I would like to tell you the name of the woman who, at 19, cost me both of my parents. Because, Miss Johnson, we did not meet 6 weeks ago. We were introduced 22 years ago by 2 men who never lived long enough to see it." Her breath moved in her chest, slow and careful. "And Han Seo-yeon," she said, "is the daughter of that woman." She closed her eyes. She opened them. "Then I would like to hear the story now, please. Not tomorrow, tonight." He looked at her for a long moment. He inclined his head, the smallest bow again, half of what he had given her in the ballroom. "As you wish." He told her, over the next 4 hours, the parts of the story he had confirmed. Solomon Johnson had not been the small businessman his daughter had believed. He had been the discreet financial architect of a coalition of Southern African families that had, in the late 90s, controlled 92% of a rare mineral vital to a specific class of Korean and Japanese electronics. He had, in 2001, uncovered a scheme by a Korean consortium, quietly fronted by the Han family, to strip his coalition of ownership through a series of forged transfers. He had approached Kang Sang-woo, Min-jun's father, who had been at that time one of the few Korean industrialists willing to break with the consortium out of a sense of honor Solomon had recognized on sight. Together, the two men had spent the next 4 years dismantling the scheme, quietly, patiently, saving 23,000 jobs in the Northern Cape and quietly rearranging the balance of an entire industry. In 2005, Solomon Johnson had been killed in a car accident on a road he had driven for 12 years without incident. In 2008, Kang Sang-woo had been shot in a Seoul restaurant by a man who had never been identified. Solomon's daughter had been 11. Sang-woo's son had been 17. The woman who had ordered both killings was Han Seo-yeon's mother. She was still alive. She was, at this precise moment, seated in the ballroom 2 floors below them, and she was, according to the report Kang Min-jun had received 17 minutes ago, on her 3rd glass of champagne. Amara did not weep. She said, "The trust fund." He looked at her. "You know about it," he said. "I know that when I turned 28 3 months ago, a lawyer in Johannesburg emailed me twice. I did not answer him because I assumed it was a scam. There is always a lawyer in Johannesburg emailing an African girl about her father's inheritance. I have known better than to answer since I was 14. Miss Johnson." "Yes." "The lawyer is not a scam. You are a very wealthy woman. You have been a very wealthy woman for 91 days. I did not tell you because I did not want you to hear it from me. I wanted you to answer him yourself, in your own time, but given tonight, you should know." She sat for a long time. She did not touch the tea Cho Eun-ja had brought. She did not touch the folder. "How wealthy?" she said finally. He told her the number. She did not react. Her father had, on that Sunday afternoon on the farm outside Stellenbosch when she was 15, made her memorize 4 things in a specific order. She recalled them now in her mind, in the order he had taught them. Check the wound. Steady the bleeding. Do not call the police. Do not react to the number. Solomon Johnson had known his daughter would need those 4 instructions one day. He had, apparently, prepared her for exactly this evening. She lifted the teacup at last. Her hand was steady. "Kangshi," she said quietly, "I would like 3 things from you. Ask. First, you will not use my inheritance as a reason to explain to the public why you chose me tonight. If you do, I will refuse it in front of the same cameras that film the paint." Agreed. Second, you will not attempt to protect me from Han Seo-yeon's mother by isolating me. I will move where I choose to move. I will work where I choose to work. If you must have Yu Sang-il following me, he will introduce himself to me tomorrow, and I will decide whether to keep him. Agreed. Third, you will give me 1 week. I will not sit beside you at any dinner, any gala, any press event for 1 week. If at the end of that week I return to this room, we will discuss what happens next. If I do not return, you will not follow me. You will respect the answer of an empty room. He looked at her for a long time. Agreed, he said. He inclined his head, the smallest bow for the 3rd time that night. She rose. She thanked him. She walked out of the private wing on the 42nd floor with her ruined uniform in a paper bag, and she took the service elevator down to the basement, and she walked out of the Grand Seoul Imperial Hotel through the staff exit, because it was, she said quietly to the security guard, the way she had walked in. The next morning at 11, in a small office in the Gangnam district, Kim Ha-rin, the co-worker on Han Seo-yeon's payroll, was quietly reassigned to a hotel in a different city with a raise she had not requested and a warning she understood without needing it repeated. At noon, Yu Sang-il rang the doorbell of a small apartment in Itaewon and introduced himself to Amara Johnson. She let him in. She poured him tea. She listened. She kept him. At 2, a lawyer in Johannesburg received the first email from his client in 3 months. It contained 1 sentence: "I would like to see the paperwork. In person. Bring everything." Han Seo-yeon spent that morning in her family's compound in Seongbuk-dong drafting 3 separate statements her publicist would refuse to release. Her mother, a woman named Yoon Hae-rim who had married into the Han name at 19 and had murdered her way to the top of it before she was 35, sat across from her daughter and did not speak for the first 40 minutes. Then finally, she lit a thin brown cigarette and said, in the same low musical voice that had once ordered the death of Solomon Johnson, "You did this to yourself." He was already looking at her before the paint. "You handed him permission. I handed him nothing. You handed him a reason the entire country would forgive. That is worse than permission. That is a gift." Han Seo-yeon did not answer. She had been raised in a house where her mother's silences were more dangerous than her sentences, and she knew, at that moment, that her mother had already decided how to end the problem. Yoon Hae-rim rose. She poured herself a whiskey. She looked out the window at the wet garden. "We will not touch her directly. We will touch her through the inheritance. When she goes to Johannesburg to sign, we will be there before her. If she signs, we own her. If she does not, she is a maid again and Min-jun will lose interest inside a season." Han Seo-yeon nodded. She would remember that nod for the rest of her life as the exact moment she had failed, without knowing it, to understand her opponent. 2 weeks later, at 10:14 a.m. Singapore time, at a private airfield outside Seletar, 3 unmarked black vans pulled onto the tarmac beside a Gulfstream G700 that had been chartered under the name of a shell corporation in Vaduz. 4 men in dark suits and 1 woman in a cream pantsuit disembarked from the vans with practiced efficiency. Their instructions had been simple. Intercept Amara Johnson on her way to the meeting with her father's estate lawyers, which had been quietly moved to Singapore on the advice of a Johannesburg office that had, unknown to Yoon Hae-rim, been compromised for 3 weeks. Bring her, alive and cooperative, to a hotel suite on Sentosa Island. Present her with a set of documents. Do not permit her to leave until she had signed them. They found her in the aircraft. She was seated in the forward cabin in a plain gray dress. She was drinking a cup of rooibos. She was alone. The woman in the cream pantsuit, a woman named Baek Soo-min, chief of Yoon Hae-rim's private security, inclined her head with the false courtesy of a diplomat. "Miss Johnson, there has been a change of venue. Please come with us." Amara set the teacup down. "Ms. Baek," she said in Korean, "you are recording this conversation on the device in your left jacket pocket. Please continue. Everything you say for the next 4 minutes will help my lawyers a great deal." Baek Soo-min's mouth did not move. Her eyes flicked once to her left pocket, which was a mistake. She had been trained not to flick. She had spent 17 years training herself not to flick. She had flicked because Amara Johnson had, in 8 quiet words, told her that she had lost the room. "Second," Amara continued, "the Gulfstream you believed I was flying is currently in a hangar in Seletar being inspected for a fuel leak. This aircraft is registered to a Singaporean holding company that has no connection to any of my father's trusts. Your intelligence, Ms. Beck, is 48 hours old. Everything you have been told in the last 48 hours has been placed in your path by a man whose father your employer killed 17 years ago. He is a patient man. I am learning from him." Baek Soo-min opened her mouth. "Third," Amara said, "the 2 vehicles now blocking the exits of this airfield are not mine. They belong to Singapore's Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau. They have been waiting for you for 6 days. Every conversation you have had inside the van since Seoul, including the one at 4:11 this morning in which you named your employer, is currently being transcribed. If you would like to negotiate a smaller sentence for yourself, this would be the correct time to sit down." Baek Soo-min looked at her. Baek Soo-min sat down. The confrontation at the International Mafia Summit 2 days later was, by the standards of the men and women who had attended such summits for decades, a modest thing. There was no gunfire, there was no shouting. There was only a long conference table in a private ballroom in Marina Bay, and at one end of it, Yoon Hae-rim, and at the other end of it, Kang Min-jun, and to Kang Min-jun's right, in a plain black dress, Amara Johnson holding a slim manila folder. Yoon Hae-rim spoke first. She spoke with the calm of a woman who had, in her time, negotiated her way out of worse rooms. "Min-jun-si, whatever your fiancé has told you, I am prepared to explain." "My fiancé," Kang Min-jun said quietly, "did not tell me anything. Miss Johnson brought me proof. That is a different transaction. Miss Johnson is a maid. Miss Johnson is a witness. Yoon Hai-rim smiled. It was, Kang Min-jun noticed, a smile calibrated for a specific effect. It was the smile of a woman who had used the same smile on his father, in a Seoul restaurant, 17 years ago, 1 minute before she had signaled to the man at the next table. I understand the picture you have painted, Yoon Hai-rim said. It is a picture, Min-jun-si. It is a story. Every family in this room has stories about every other family in this room. That is how we survive one another. What I am prepared to offer, on behalf of the Han family, is a settlement, a gesture, to acknowledge the misunderstanding of these past weeks. Ms. Yoon. Yes. There has been no misunderstanding. There has been a document trail. My father kept it. Your daughter did not know it existed. Your husband did not know it existed. You did not know it existed, because my father was a more patient man than any of you gave him credit for. Miss Johnson's father was more patient still. He mailed a copy to a bank in Basel 4 weeks before he died. It has been waiting there for 20 years. It is now in this folder. It contains your signature. It contains your voice. It contains, in the handwriting of a bookkeeper you had killed in 2002, a list of the 7 other assassinations you ordered before my father's and Solomon Johnson's. Yoon Hai-rim's face did not change, but her right hand, which had been resting on her water glass, tightened once so slightly that it would have been invisible to anyone who was not looking for it. Kang Min-jun was looking for it. Amara was looking for it. Yoon Hai-rim delivered her final speech in the same low musical voice with which she had ordered her first killing. It was a good speech. It was coldly logical. It reframed 20 years of murder as a series of necessary corrections. It implied without saying that the men she had killed had themselves been men who would have killed her family first. It was, for a moment, almost persuasive. Even Amara understood, listening to it, why so many people had loved this woman for so long. When Yoon Hai-rim finished, Kang Min-jun did not raise his voice. He said one sentence. "This is over." He closed the folder. He stood. He did not look at Yoon Hai-rim again. Han Seo-yeon, her mother, her uncle, and 11 other individuals were arrested at 11 o'clock that evening in 3 countries on charges that would take 4 years to prosecute and would, in the end, redraw the political map of both South Korea and Southern Africa. Amara left the conference room before Kang Min-jun did. She left because she had decided, in her father's memory, not to be photographed as anyone's replacement. She walked out on her own 2 feet through the front doors, exactly as she had walked out of the ballroom on the night of the paint. She did not return to Seoul with him. She flew the next morning to Johannesburg, and then to a small town outside Kimberley she had not seen in 11 years. She sat on the porch of her grandmother's old house for 3 weeks. She read her father's letters. She met with his lawyers. She signed nothing until she had read every page. She refused every offer Kang Min-jun's assistants made to send anything or anyone. When Yoo Sang-il, at Min-jun's quiet suggestion, offered to fly to Johannesburg to keep watch at a distance, she thanked him and asked him to remain in Seoul. She did not, she said gently, need watching any longer. 4 months passed. She rebuilt her father's foundation from the porch of a farmhouse. She hired a young lawyer from Cape Town who had once been denied a job at her father's old firm because his surname was wrong. She began quietly, funding a scholarship for young African women studying business in Asia. She wrote, on the 3rd month, 1 letter. She sent it to a private address in Seongbuk-dong. The letter said, "If you would like to see me, I will be at the Grand Seoul Imperial Hotel on the 11th of next month. I have a small piece of business there. You may find me in the lobby at 4 in the afternoon. I make no promises about anything else." The 11th of next month arrived. At 3:58, Amara Johnson walked into the lobby of the Grand Seoul Imperial Hotel through the front doors. She was wearing a simple dark blue dress. She carried a small paper bag. Around her neck was her mother's silver locket. Jong Baek-ho, the concierge, saw her from across the lobby and inclined his head to a depth that would have astonished the ballroom 4 months earlier. She inclined hers in return. Kang Min-jun was already there. He was standing near the same set of golden doors he had walked through 9 months earlier. He was not surrounded by security. He was not surrounded by anything. He was simply a tall man in a plain gray suit, waiting. She crossed the lobby to him. She did not hurry. She stopped 1 meter from him, the same distance he had stopped from her on the night of the paint. Kang Si. Miss Johnson. She held out the paper bag. Inside it, folded neatly, was a laundered and pressed white maid's uniform. She had spent an entire afternoon in Johannesburg getting the last of the black paint out of the collar. "I've been meaning to return this," she said quietly. "It belongs to the hotel." He took the bag. He looked down at it. He looked up at her. And Kang Min-jun, who had smiled twice in the last 15 years, and both times at her, smiled a third time. "I have a room upstairs," he said. "For me?" "For a conversation, if you would like one." "I would like one." "You will decide the length of it." "I know." "You will decide the ending of it." "I know that too." He inclined his head, not the smallest bow, a deeper one, a bow that acknowledged the woman standing across from him, not as a guest, not as a maid, not as an heiress, not as a witness, but as a person he had spent his entire adult life not believing existed and had, at last, been given permission to see. She took his arm. They walked together to the elevator that had, on a rainy Tuesday 9 months ago, carried her up to a suite where a bleeding stranger lay face down on a pale carpet. She noticed halfway across the lobby that there was still a faint stain of dried black paint in the grouting of a marble tile near the ballroom's side entrance. The hotel had scrubbed and scrubbed. It had never quite come out. She smiled at it as she passed. The world spent the next 20 years arguing about what she was: heiress, philanthropist, mafia queen, foundation chairwoman, wife. The world got most of it wrong. The world always did. The truth was quieter, and it belonged only to the two of them. And to a paper bag containing a laundered uniform, and to a silver locket that had once held the photograph of a woman on a farm outside Stellenbosch, who had told her daughter, on her deathbed, that the world would one day look at her the way it should have looked at her all along. The world had taken its time, but being seen, in the end, was never about the world's looking. It was about who, in a ballroom full of 1,000 eyes, was the first person to actually look. If this story moved you, if you felt that quiet fire in her silence when the paint hit her collar and she did not blink, subscribe and stay close, because the next story we tell is about the woman the world spent a lifetime overlooking and the exact hour it finally, at last, could not look away.